Not all breakdowns happen in silence. Some arrive like earthquakes, cracking what you thought was indestructible. It began with a voicemail Susie wasn't meant to hear. She had left her mobile on the kitchen counter while braiding Minutjan's hair for school. He liked it that way now, tight, neat, like the boys on his football team. The phone buzzed once. Then again. Then rang. She almost ignored it. But the name flashing on the screen froze her. Unknown number. Then came the message alert. She pressed play. Susie, this is Detective O from Yongsan Police Station. We've detained a Mr. Kim Young for disturbing the peace, resisting arrest, and suspected drug use. He's been asking for you. We suggest you come down here. Her blood drained all at once. Not because she cared about Kim Young's arrest, but because Minutjan was still asleep in the next room, and his father, the man who once read bedtime stories and promised forever, had just been arrested for drugs. It was worse than she imagined. At the station, Susie walked in with her hospital badge visible, her hair slicked back, her eyes cold and clear. Kim Young sat on a bench behind reinforced glass, eyes bloodshot, face bruised, lips cracked. He looked like a man unraveled. And yet, when he saw her, he smiled. Susie, he croaked. I knew you'd come. She crossed her arms. I'm not here for comfort, Young. I'm here because your son may hear about this. And I need to know what exactly you've done. He leaned back against the wall, weary. It wasn't drugs. Not exactly. Hannah lied. She set me up. Susie didn't blink. And the resisting arrest. I thought they were paparazzi, he muttered. I panicked. She studied him for a long time. He wasn't lying. But he wasn't telling the truth either. You've become a danger to yourself, she said quietly. And that makes you a danger to Minutjan. His eyes filled with tears. Don't take him away from me. Please. I'm already drowning. You handed me the rope, Young, she replied. And then set it on fire. Back in Incheon, whispers followed Susie like shadows. The media had gotten hold of the arrest. Her hospital administrator requested a discretionary leave of absence to preserve institutional image. They didn't care that she was the betrayed party. Scandal dirties everyone, even the innocent. Sang-hyun offered to help, defended her reputation in a public op-ed, called the board short-sighted cowards. But Susie declined his offer to take her away for a while. She wasn't running. She never had. The turning point came on a Sunday afternoon when she received a second call from Minutjan's school counselor. Mrs. Kim, the voice said carefully, your son's drawings, they're showing signs of distress. Dark colors. Violent themes. He's been withdrawn. Susie felt her knees wobble slightly. Is he being bullied? No, the woman said. But he talks about his father, dying. That night, Susie found the drawings under Minutjan's pillow. One showed Kim Young in a car crash, flames licking up through twisted metal. Another had a woman, herself, standing in the rain, crying blood. She clutched them to her chest and sobbed quietly, for the first time in weeks. Not for Young, but for her son. Their son. A boy losing his father to shame, and his mother to strength. She made a decision. Not out of forgiveness, but for protection. The next morning, she filed a motion with the court to restrict Kim Young's visitation rights indefinitely, citing mental instability and public endangerment. It wasn't permanent, but it was enough to create a barrier. A necessary one. When Young heard, he broke. He called her from a borrowed number, voice shaking. You think this is justice, he hissed. You think this makes you noble? No, Susie replied. It makes me a mother. And then she blocked him. But Young wasn't done. Not yet. He began leaving letters outside her door, long, rambling apologies. Sometimes roses. Sometimes CDs with music they once danced to. Sometimes photos from the early days, back when love still lived in their smiles. One night, Susie found him outside the hospital gates. He'd been waiting in the rain. You don't have to love me, he said, shivering. Just remember I did once. She walked past him without a word. But behind the scenes, Kim Young spiraled further. Hannah had cut ties completely. His production partners abandoned him. Debt collectors now called him more than friends ever did. He pawned his watch. then his car, then his dignity. And somewhere between the third eviction notice and the final legal letter, he decided that if the world wouldn't forgive him, he would make sure it never forgot him. Not Susie. Not Minute Jun. Not anyone. That night, Susie came home to find the apartment door slightly ajar. She knew she'd locked it. The lights were off. Minute Jun, she called out, instantly alert. Silence. Her heartbeat thundered in her ears. She reached for her pepper spray and stepped inside, slowly, silently. In the dimness of the living room stood a silhouette. Tall. Still. Breathing. And then his voice broke the air. You changed the locks. But I still had a key. Kim Young. His eyes were glassy. His expression unreadable. Get out, she whispered, heart thudding. He didn't move. I just wanted to see him sleep. Just once. Before you erase me completely. You're unwell, she said, slowly backing toward her mobile. I'll call the police. He stepped forward. No, Susie. This time. I'll be the one to end it. And from his coat, he pulled out a small vial. Clear liquid. Familiar to any doctor. Susie gasped. Don't do this, don't you dare. But he only smiled. Now you'll remember me forever. And with that, he drank it. The sound of a man dying is not always a scream. Sometimes, it's silence. A silence so loud, it tears through walls. The vial shattered on the parquet floor. Susie stood frozen. Her hands trembled, but her voice did not. Kim Young, she said, firmly now, open your eyes. Breathe. But he was already collapsing, his body jerking once, then going limp, hitting the floor like a felled tree. She lunged, years of training kicking in. Her hands found his neck, pulse faint, scattered. His breathing, shallow and stuttering. No, 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 don't you get to leave this way. She grabbed her phone. Dialed emergency. Her voice shook as she gave the address. Then she began chest compressions. 1, 2, 3. Her tears didn't fall. Because this was war. And war had no time for weeping. At Incheon General Emergency, they worked on him for 26 minutes. Activated charcoal. 4 lines. Cardiac shock. A cocktail of chemicals swam in his bloodstream, part sedative, part industrial cleaner. It was not a cry for help. It was a suicide attempt by design. He survived. Barely. The doctor, a younger resident, approached Susie in the waiting area. He'll live, she said, hesitating. But his liver may be permanently damaged. We've placed him under psychiatric hold for 72 hours. Susie sat, unmoving, her fingers clasped so tightly her knuckles blanched. Who brought him in? The doctor asked. You. I'm the ex-wife, Susie replied. And the one who used to believe he'd never hurt a fly. News traveled fast. Within hours, tabloids ran the headline. Disgraced film director attempts suicide in ex-wife's home. Minute Jun's school parents group erupted in gossip. At the hospital, whispers returned. The administrator sent a message, perhaps consider a longer leave. Indefinite. Sang-hyun arrived with coffee and silence. He didn't speak until she did. I should have seen this coming, Susie said, her voice low. He's not just broken. He's shattered. Sang-hyun sat beside her. No one survives loving someone who's bent on destroying themselves. That night, Susie did something she hadn't done in years. She cried. Not for the man, but for the truth she could no longer deny. Part of her still loved the boy he once was. The Kim Young who stayed up all night feeding their newborn son. The one who danced with her in their showbox flat, humming old jazz records. The man who became a monster, and still managed to bleed human. At the psychiatric ward, Kim Young stared at the ceiling, unmoving. Doctors asked questions. He refused answers. He would not see Susie. He asked only for one thing, a pen and paper. And in long, messy strokes, he wrote a letter that no one else would read. 10 days later, a small, private funeral was held. No, Kim Young hadn't died. But someone had. Seo Hana. A car crash in Gangwon province. High speed. Fog. No brakes. No survivors. She had been alone. No one claimed the body except her father, who buried her without press, without words. But it was the message left behind that shook Susie. A parcel arrived at her door. Inside, a flash drive. And a note. He lied to both of us. And I was pregnant. Susie sat on her bed, stunned. Pregnant. A child never to be born. A second life consumed by one man's chaos. She plugged in the flash drive. Photos. Emails. Audio recordings. Evidence. Of Young's manipulation. His threats. His gambling. The hidden camera he once planted in Susie's study. It was all there. And it was monstrous. She handed it all to her lawyer. Then to the press. And for the first time since the spiral began, Susie controlled the narrative. She wasn't the cheated wife anymore. She wasn't the scandal. She was the truth. But truth comes at a cost. Minute Jun became quieter. Drawings darker. He asked questions no 10-year-old should. Did Daddy want to die? Did he love her more than us? Will you leave too? Susie held him tightly. I will never leave you, she whispered. Even if the world falls apart. He pressed his face into her chest. Mummy, he murmured, sometimes, I dream of fire. She said nothing. Because so did she. In her quiet apartment in Incheon, Susie stared at a photograph of their wedding day. They had looked like something out of a magazine. Two fools in love. Now, that image sat in the bin. Glass cracked. Frame broken. The love, long buried. But the damage, still bleeding. Every ruin once had a blueprint. Every tragedy, a choice. And every survivor, a secret. It had been 4 weeks since Hannah's funeral. For weeks since the flash drive exploded the truth. For weeks since Susie stopped pretending that healing was a clean, beautiful thing. Grief doesn't knock. It seeps. It found her in the way Minute Jun chewed his cereal, quietly, like a boy holding in explosions. It found her in the emails left unanswered, the hospital calls she ignored, the friends who didn't know what to say anymore. And then, it came again. A white envelope. No name. Slipped under her front door. Inside was a single photograph. Black and white. A child, Minute Jun, playing in the park. And in the background, Kim Young, watching. She ran to the window, heart racing. No one. Not a trace of movement on the street. She called the police. They took a report, promised surveillance. But Susie already knew the truth. He was back. Released from psychiatric hold. Quietly. Legally. Without notice. They couldn't keep him. Not without a new crime. And suicide, after all, wasn't illegal. She hired private security. Moved Minute Jun's school pickup to a new entrance. Changed locks again. Installed cameras. But something had shifted in her. This was no longer fear. It was war. At night, she pored over everything Hannah had left behind. Voice memos. Emails. Contracts. She pieced together Kim Young's secret deals, laundered funds, fake accounts, production shell companies. And something else. One name. Repeated too often. Park Dae-hwan. A fixer. A cleanup man in Seoul's underground. Known for silencing journalists, buying police, and burying scandals. Susie called Sang-hyun. I need a trace on this man. Park Dae-hwan. Susie, he said slowly. You're not in this business. You're a doctor. A mother. I'm a woman with nothing left to lose. That night, Minute Jun had a nightmare. He woke screaming. Clutching his pillow. Soaked in sweat. He was here, he sobbed. Daddy was here. Susie hugged him so tightly she could barely breathe. I'm here. He can't hurt you. I won't let him. But in the back of her mind, she wondered. Could she protect him? From his own father. A week later, Sang-hyun called. I found something, he said. Park Dae-hwan is real. And he's tied to something bigger. Bigger how? There was a missing person case. A journalist. Lee Nari. Disappeared 2 years ago. Last seen investigating corruption in the film industry. And she had evidence against Kim Young. She never got to publish it. Silence. I think he had her silenced, Susie. Susie's knees buckled. If it were true, Then Kim Young wasn't just a broken man. He was a criminal. A murderer. And he'd been sleeping beside her. Raising her child. Calling himself husband. The final blow came unexpectedly. A letter arrived. Typed. Legal. Kim Young was suing for shared custody. Her hands trembled as she read it. He was going to court. He wanted Minute Jun. Not full-time. Just enough to stay present. To remind her he still existed. Still had power. It wasn't about the child. It was about control. She attended the preliminary hearing with her lawyer. Kim Young arrived clean-shaven, suited, solemn-faced. He played the reformed man. Spoke softly. Told the judge about rehabilitation, remorse, and recovery. "I only want to be in my son's life," he said. "He deserves to know his father still loves him." Susie wanted to scream. Instead, she handed over the evidence, photos, recordings, expert statements. She watched as the judge's eyes narrowed. But Young, he just smiled. Like he'd already won. That night, Sang-hyun called her. "Be careful, Susie," he said quietly. "Men like him don't give up. They implode. And when they do, they take everything with them." She hung up and stared at herself in the mirror. The woman looking back had aged. But her eyes burned brighter than ever. She would not lose. Not to Kim Young. Not to history. But history has a way of writing its own endings. And Susie had no idea. There is a moment before a storm where the air grows still. It's not peace. It's a warning. Susie knew it. Felt it. The air around her had thickened, like the breath of something ancient holding its lungs. Something terrible was coming. She just didn't know from which direction it would strike. The court battle had begun. Day after day, they sat across each other. Kim Young, ever the chameleon, calm, composed, charming, telling the court he was rehabilitated. That he wanted to build a life with his son. That he forgave Susie. It was sickening. The judge was fair, but not blind. Still, the law wasn't a scalpel, it was a hammer. And Kim Young knew how to swing it. One night, Susie came home to find her front door slightly open. The security system, disabled. Nothing stolen. But on her son's pillow lay an object. A paper crane. Red. Blood red. Her breath caught in her chest. It was the origami Kim Young used to fold back when they first dated. He used to say, "One for each promise I'll never break." Now it was a warning. She pulled Minute Jun out of school the next day. Moved him to her mother's house in Busan without a word. Installed 24/7 surveillance in her flat. And began preparing for her final move. With Sang-hyun's help, she built a case, thicker, darker, more damning than ever. She tracked Park Dae-hwan through offshore accounts. Tied Kim Young to Lee Nari's disappearance. Connected the dots between his debt and the deaths of 2 crew members on his last film set. She gave it all to the prosecutor's office. It was enough. A warrant was drafted. Kim Young was to be arrested the following week. But something didn't feel right. Too quiet. Too easy. The night before the arrest, Susie was home alone. She stood in the kitchen, staring at a glass of untouched wine. Then, a creak. The unmistakable sound of her back door opening. She froze. Listened. A breath. Not hers. A footstep. Then, his voice. "Why did you do it, Susie?" She turned. There he stood. Kim Young. Disheveled. Pale. His eyes sunken, dead inside. But calm. Too calm. He walked in slowly, like he owned the room. No weapon. Just a glass bottle in his hand. "What did you tell them?" he asked softly. "What lies did you spin?" "They weren't lies," she replied, voice steady. "You did this to yourself." "No," he said, stepping closer. "You did this. You took everything." His voice cracked. "You took my son. You ruined my name. And now, I have nothing." "You made that choice," she whispered. He smiled. "I made one more." The explosion wasn't loud. Just a sharp, metallic pop. The bottle in his hand, glass and gasoline. The flame, lit in a blink. Fire. It spread fast. Faster than logic. Faster than grief. Susie woke up in hospital. Burns on her hands, smoke in her lungs. She dragged herself out. Neighbors pulled her from the stairwell. The flat was gone. Everything inside, ash, including him. Kim Young's body was identified by dental records. There was no note. Just the red paper crane, half-scorched, fused to the floor. Minute Jun never returned to that city. Susie sold the apartment. Resigned from the hospital. She changed her number. Moved to Busan permanently. Opened a small clinic by the sea. She never remarried. Never spoke of Kim Young again. Years later, on the anniversary, Minute Jun asked, "Mummy, did he love us?" Susie stared out at the waves. "I think," she said, "he loved us in the only way he knew how. But that way hurt." "Yes," she replied quietly. "Some people's love is a knife. Sharp, beautiful, but deadly when held too long." Minute Jun nodded and said no more. In the end, love didn't save them. Truth didn't free them. But Susie survived. Not whole, but surviving. And sometimes, that's the most we can do.